Thank you for joining us for today's Growing Forward webinar. Today's webinar is focused on ag technology implementation and lessons from early implementers. We have a panel of expert assembles who will share their experience and advice on how to select new technology, how to prepare for implementation, pitfalls to avoid, and how to integrate it into your culture and workflow. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that these webinars are pre-recorded, but the experts are available live. So if you have any questions, log into YouTube, put your questions in the live chat, and they will answer them throughout the webinar. Also, a quick thank you to all our Growing Forward sponsors, especially opti-harvest and AgCode, who are sponsoring this session. Now I'd like to kick it over to our moderator, Donny from AgCode, who will introduce the panel.
This session is sponsored by opti-harvest. Better light makes better fruit. And AgCode. People growers trust technology that works.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Donny. I'm the CEO of AgCode. If you don't know AgCode is a 20-year-old farm management system that's widely used in the wine industry. And I'm very fortunate today to be here moderating really this great panel of adopters of technology. So to get going, why don't we go around and I'll introduce Rob, Courtney, and Greg and let them kind of introduce themselves and what they do at their respective companies. So let's start with Rob Whyte, who's the COO of Renteria. Rob, why don't you tell us about what you do?
Yes, so at Renteria Vineyard Management, we manage over 2,000 acres of wine grape vineyards across Napa Valley, spread across about 75 different vineyards and 40 different clients. So a wide range of locations and goals and objectives that we're constantly managing.
Awesome. And next in my window, I've got Courtney. So Courtney Preston Shifflett is the viticulturist at Duckhorn. So why don't you introduce yourself, Courtney?
Hi, Courtney Preston Shifflett. I'm the senior viticulturist North Coast for the Duckhorn portfolio. I've been with Duckhorn almost 10 years, and I manage the viticulture in the 3 North Coast counties, Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino. We have a little over 1,000 acres, and that's in estate acreage.
Good. And then we have Greg Gonzalez, who's the director of Central Coast Farming for Foley Family Farms.
Yes. We're Foley Family Farms. So we're kind of farming arm of Foley Family Wines. So we're two different legs, and we have around 5,000 acres total on the West Coast here, from Washington down to Santa Barbara County. So I'm located down in Santa Barbara County, where we have Firestone, Lynn Court, and our Foley Estates properties in Santa Rita Hills. So I've been with the company about 2 years now. Spent majority of my time, about 13 years in Monterey County, where I really started my career, and implementing new technologies and kind of evolving our farming systems.
That's awesome. Well, thanks guys for joining today. And you have some very different and well-respected organizations. So it'd be interesting to hear, really hopefully get out today of, how you started in tech and what things that you worked through when you adopted technology, where you are today, and kind of hopefully where you're, maybe what you're looking for in the future. So kind of why don't we start with when I've been in ag tech now for more than a dozen years. And so oftentimes the first thing when we talk to a customer or prospect or a grower who's thinking about technology for the first time, they always ask, well, what do I need to worry about? Right? What's the first thing? And I always say it's starts with the challenges that they're looking to face. There's not a panacea of everything. So maybe I'll just open it up and ask, what challenges were you facing or opportunities were you trying to take advantage of that made you think about technology as a solution?
It's I'll I'll start by saying that wasn't originally my mindset going into the world of ag tech. I think I was like many others, were a bunch of shiny pennies, right? When the ag tech boom really started coming out over the last 10 years, there was a lot of really cool looking stuff. And, we were very receptive to all of it and trying it all. And, reflecting back on that, I realized that, we wasted a lot of time not being organized and not really prioritizing what our biggest needs were. So the idea of identifying our biggest challenges or opportunities and the needs that we have as a company, and then also as an industry, that's relatively new. And we're still learning really how to organize our thoughts and really understand where we should be focusing our efforts. We're at Renteria, we're a relatively small team, as the others on here as well, where we don't really have the resources of people and equipment and the financial resources to really take on everything. So what we've been doing internally is starting that discussion, since we manage for so many different vineyard owners or clients, is really starting that discussion of, as a whole, what are our biggest challenges, and that's reviewing, the past years. What did we encounter? What were the biggest pains that we faced? If it has to do with, yields or quality, which is a little tough to describe. Maybe we'll talk about that a little later. So we're also, we do labor, right? We're a farm labor contractor. And that is a major challenge that we have. It's part of the changing environment within California, within our industry, is, what technologies should we be pursuing that will enable us to be more efficient or effective, or even reduce our dependency on labor. So it's something that we're still learning how to do, and love to talk about that a little bit more, some of the techniques we're using as well.
Right. So you were dealing with, and a lot of wine industry, when they think about technology, labor is a big driver. Overtime rules and things like that have been a challenge, just certainly in California. And we're seeing it in other markets in Washington. Washington's a few years behind us and California now, but they're finding the same issues that we found. So maybe I'll switch it over to I'll just go down the list so I keep it straight in my mind. Courtney, what were you guys dealing with when you first started thinking about technology?
Yeah, so that's interesting. And we've seen like a big kind of pendulum swing on that. And as Rob said, when we first kind of were getting into some of these technologies, there was a lot coming at us. So we did go through this period of almost exhaustion of, we've heard it all, we've seen it all at this point. And now I think over the last couple of years, we've been rolling into, looking really critically at what we need. How are we going to fill some of these gaps in our data or our efficiencies or, our sustainability initiatives, and who can help us with that? So I feel like we're in a good situation where we are able to cherry pick a lot of, the technologies that are really going to help us. We've been able to beta test a few technologies, and working with those companies on beta testing has just been really cool, actually really inspiring to see the minds behind some of this tech and how much they want to help us to with our objectives as much as we want to fulfill our objectives. So yeah, I'd say we're coming from that. If we're looking at what specifically right now we're going into, I work for, we're a group of wine brands. So, and I'm on the estate vineyard side. So I kind of look at it from a different perspective, because although labor is super important, that's not necessarily my particular wheelhouse. So, what we've been dealing with is things that climate and weather related are going to either be impacting us more and more through the future, or we just know that we have to start finding answers for. So that's, figuring out better weather measurement strategies and systems, irrigation. I mean, there's a lot of irrigation techs out there. So I think that's something that everyone on this needs to look critically at, is how do you see irrigation? What makes sense for your brain and for your systems? And also, something that's been top of mind, although luckily not so much this year, but in the past few years, is how can we wrap our heads and our technologies around smoke and smoke taint precursors, and how do we make that something measurable and something that we can potentially combat against? So I'd say that's kind of the direction we're going in.
Interesting. Greg, what brought your company to tech? Where did you start?
Yeah, so I kind of had a different path, because as I started as an intern in Monterey County, I came without a traditional viticulture enology side. I was doing geographic information systems, earth system science, technology, social behavioral sciences. And, when I mapped the seafloor, I've done LiDAR stuff, I've done satellite imagery. So analyzing imagery for burn scar ratios after, fires and things like that. So I came at it through being exposed to a lot of different technologies in other realms. And as I started, mapping our properties, and then just more and more data was given to me in terms of what we're producing on paper sheets, and I just started asking the question, where is this coming from? And it was, well, this ranch. Well, no. Well, there's 4 sections in this ranch. What section? Well, what block? What then vine, row? And that just kind of opened the door to saying, okay, we have a lot to work with. We have a permanent crop. So our abilities to understand the relation that geography has on our abilities to manage, both on the viticulture side, labor side, the equipment side, all these things were heavily dependent on geography. So what can we do? And, from the social and behavioral sciences things, and understanding mapping culture, it always starts at why are we where we're at to start with? What has got us here in the first place? What has created this company culture? How have we, why are we growing grapes? Why are we managing our equipment? Why are we're moving our crews? Anything? Why is this happening? And then after understanding the process, then you can start thinking about, okay, what technology is going to help the process? Because it's really hard to change process. And that's what makes us all unique as farmers, and where we grow, the regions that we grow, the slopes, the aspects, our soil series, everything. So that's how I looked at it. As starting as an intern was being in the crews, realizing that we not only had been doing something for a long time very well,
right,
but we're starting to have less and less resources to do it. So where can we apply technology to overcome those burdens of resources, and continue to do what we're doing as an organization? So that's kind of what I looked at it, was saying, all right, 10 years down the road, when we're going to be limited, what's going to help us get there and not force us? Sometimes adoption of technology is forced. You have to, whether it's regulation or just the changing of time, but what's going to get us there prior to us having a dependency on it? So that, in the realm of stuff that I was exposed to during school, and then giving the opportunity to learn how to grow wine grapes, that's kind of what led us down, and that started really, really early in the ag tech space. So a lot of the technologies that I looked at weren't even ag tech at that point.
Right. So maybe I'll just open this up to anybody that's got some thoughts on this. So, I mean, my experience and your experience with technologies, you've got a lot of different technologies coming at you, right? There's different things they're trying to solve. Some are easy to identify as far as an outcome. Some are kind of hard to identify as, what's the real outcome. How do you think about return on investment or impact for your organization when you're thinking about technology?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one. Return on investment. I think that's a big topic, especially for, there's so many different types of operations that we see. You know, I happen to be working for a larger company, and then there's some smaller companies. So you do have to look critically at what technology is going to fit in the scope of your budgeting and your system. And I mean, I have some of the most expensive technology you can have, and then I also have, on like the complete opposite end, really affordable, like some, you know, cheaper stuff that works amazing too. So, you know, I would say with the whole scope of things, it depends on what your objective is, and I mean, I guess I mean, at the end of the day, my biggest warning to people is going to be, don't ever fall for the silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. So you got to figure out exactly what it is you're trying to do, and don't let someone overpromise, because unfortunately it tends to disappoint. So, you know, you have to kind of go, if you're on a budget, look for like the humble people that are, you know, telling you, hey, this is going to work. We're going to work with you on this. You know, it's not going to be perfect all the time, but let's work on this. We'll be quick to service, you know, if ever it goes down, and things like that. And I think that's where you get the bang for your buck, is, you know, going with the people that are going to be respectful of you and your company and your time, and they communicate and they're service based. Yeah, that's what I look for pretty much.
It's the people. It's like the technology is it's got to be there, right? But we all know technology isn't foolproof, right? There's going to be issues with it. It's really the people that you're partnering with, right? That you're trusting to help make sure that works in the end, right?
Yeah, well, because, you know, first and foremost, and almost just as important, like, but first and foremost, the technology has to work and it has to service. Like, I don't think anyone would argue on that. And then, you know, just as important to me is always going to be that relationship I build with that provider, and how great their service is and their communication. I mean, there's technologies that we work with that, I mean, we talk to them weekly, and I have a really close relationship with almost every tech that we use, and it has made our implementation of that technology way better, and our data is way more sound.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a tough one, a tough question. And, you know, the ROI is so difficult to work through, and that's probably our biggest challenge. But as Gregory said, you know, really knowing your current state, you know, where you currently are as a company or organization or a vineyard. And that's, for us, has been a really good starting point with technologies, is how can we measure with existing technologies or emerging technologies, where are we at and where are we headed? So for us, for labor, you know, great technology is tracking our metrics in the field. So if we're before I start jumping into robots and crazy machine pruners and all this stuff, you know, I'm going to have to be able to compare that to my current state. So that's really where we've started. Same with irrigation. You know, if we're going to be trying to, you know, optimize our plant stress or reducing, you know, the water resources, using a lot of technologies that currently exist that can perhaps be improved upon in the future, but to better understand where we are at. So thank you for bringing that up, Greg. I think that's a really important point that I've found myself in trouble by just jumping straight ahead without really having a base understanding of where I am.
Yep, that's it, right? ROI is your return on your investment, but what is that investment trying to return? So if you don't have any baseline data to say that you're progressing, or you don't measure, then you're just bringing a number. So in turn, if you adopt a technology that you don't have anything to compare, then your first 2 to 3 years is building that baseline. And then by year 5, just like we are, you know, start a new nutrition program with our vines, we're not going to see overnight response, right? If we start training differently, things like that, it's still, you're going to have a curve. And until you can get those lines of data and figure out where that KPI is that you're trying to achieve, you know, if you're prepped going into it and you say, I've been tracking this for 5 years by hand with this paper sheet, and this is where I'm at, and then you implement a technology that's supposed to replicate that, then you have immediate response in terms of that ROI. And then also your ROI could be relative to the scale in which you're trying to implement it on. So when you're looking into ROI, you want to think about small scale. So then you can get an idea of what that ROI would be and then extrapolate it out as an operational base. And then you can decide quickly on a trial basis, or you set aside some acres, what's going to be the impact if I deploy this operation wide? Because sometimes you might find that, the ROI is huge, but my ability to implement this at 10 acre scale was so difficult that if I'm going to do this at 1,000 acre scale, I better be, get my ducks in a line here, because it's quickly go the other direction for you.
Let's talk about, let's kind of drill down in on that problem, which is one that the other thing that comes up when I talk to growers have for a dozen years is, listen, my people are used to writing it down on a piece of paper and putting it on the dashboard of the truck, and then that may find its way into the office, right? That's our record keeping system today. How do you go, so you've got a cultural shift, right? How do you go from, you got a team that's done well, right? I mean, you've built great organizations and you succeeded based on that. And then all of a sudden you're going to tell them, listen, we're going to go to this. We're going to give you a phone, or we're going to give you some technology. And you're going to shift your processes, and you're going to shift how you do things, because listen, if we're not tracking it, if we don't get better information, we can't make a better decision, right? That's the whole point of what we're doing with technology. How did you guys go through that process? And was it easy? Was it hard? What'd you learn?
Yeah, that's been really, really tough. Don't mean to interrupt you, but as for us, we have a fairly large in-house team, and if we're going to scale a lot of these technologies, it can reach 500 phones pretty quickly. Being really clear and transparent on the purpose of why we're going to implement a new technology, or why we're trying something new. We as a company, part of our culture, part of a shared value, is really trying to be progressive, to look ahead at challenges, to prepare and plan and attack before they're on top of us. So really alignment from the very top, from the very beginning. And oftentimes, actually every time, the buy-in that we get is great. We get recommendations from those around us. We probably changed directions of technologies, or the way that we implement technologies 15 times over the course of it, because we're getting the feedback directly from those around us. So it's really, really been important for us to be clear and transparent and honest about why we're doing this.
And I'm going to jump on that too, just really quickly. I think training your staff is huge, and how you train them, and making sure that they actually truly understand how to use the software or the app. A lot of the technologies we use now, the ones I prefer, they do have an app-based input system for data, or for closing out work orders, AgCode, so making sure that the people that are using it are just trained really well on it.
Yeah, agreed. So my approach, because we're talking about a kind of a paradigm shift within your organization, was to almost do a passive rollout to start with. So when I say passive, I mean you bring the technology out and it's around people. There, you're not saying, here now, this paper, give me that. Now you're here. It's more, hey, come look at this. Or show me your papers. What are you putting down there? How are you thinking about this? How do you get that? And so that going back to that, understanding how our flow, our process on those adopters, those potential adopters of the technology, or those drivers, your power users, you can start finding similarities in terms of oh, okay, they always write this down and they always write this down. And this is where they finally get to that paper form that ends up on the dash that eventually gets into the office. So when you start looking at their little pocket notepad and seeing their thought process go on, you start, and then as you get to know them and you say, hey, if I got this guy to adopt, then everything else is going to fall in line, because friendly competition saying, hey, you know what, if Greg's doing it, I better get on it, because I ain't going to let that guy show me up. So it's like friendly competition. And then as you get this kind of soft rollout, those guys become the experts and they become the trainers, and they have these 20, 30-year relationships with those that you want to adopt on the mass that say, hey, if so-and-so is doing it, I can do that. I'm better than him. And you just get this. And then as you get the official rollout where you have that company meeting and, we're going to do this, you can have those who just, you approach to, is this technology all right? What do you think about it? They come in as the champion, and everybody says, if so-and-so is doing this, I'm piece of cake for me. And, and it just so payroll records, right? And it's something that you have to do because people have to get paid. So
if you don't do that well, then
right. If you link it with something that's kind of you trying to naturally grow it up indirectly, and then once it's in there, it's not foreign, and it's a must do in order for business to happen. That's where I achieved the greatest results as we were starting to move through emerging technologies. And then if you have that first one that you introduce, if it goes well, it's amazing how much else you can then implement because you did the first one right.
So I've really got a couple questions in my head now. I'll start with the first one, which is it a season to get there? Is it 2 seasons? When you first get that, you get that champion, right? That super user, that someone that maybe didn't think that they'd be that super user, but for some reason they got it and they picked it up first, and they're the ones that are everyone looks to, as you said, to how they worked with that application. Did it work for them before they kind of jump? They're kind of laggards in that adoption curve. Is that a season? Is that, what's your history on when you adopt technology before you really start seeing it? As you said, that pilot is kind of early. You start with so many acres. Where do you see that where all of a sudden it starts taking off from an internal adoption?
Well, I think something that tends to be difficult is the seasonality of what we do. So, yes, people can become really good at using the different techs. But in my experience, we've pretty much always had to do a training at the beginning of the season, and then, kind of one-offs here and there, depending on what event, because it's not like we're doing the same thing 100% of the time. When spray season starts, it's like you haven't seen a spray season since, 6 months before that.
People tend to forget. They forgot from last season what they did and how they did it. And you got to retrain them.
Totally. And it's same for me, same for all of us. It's like, I've been doing the same things for 15 years. And then, you come back around and sure enough, you're like, how did I do that? So I think it's just constant. You kind of constantly have to keep doing it. But for the buy-in portion of the technology, I think that usually takes around 2 to 3 seasons for full kind of buy-in. People feel comfortable enough that it's a very simple reintroduction.
So people shouldn't come to technology and go, in month 1, if everyone's not using it, it's a failure, because culturally it's going to take, as you said, potentially 2 or 3 seasons to get real adoption. Yeah,
definitely. And even the full utilization of a lot of the techs that I've used, it can be up to 5 years to actually, because a lot of them, either if you're helping beta test and build with them, or if it's already a very comprehensive technology system. There's so many layers to a lot of this, and so much data that gets collected, and even more in the background that half of us don't even see. that it can take, 5 years to even understand like what all of the information some of these techs are gathering is, and how to present them, and how to actually like pull out the data in a usable form.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It's unless you're a first adopter and you're still helping a company prove a concept, it's pretty quick to tell if something works, does what it's intended to do, whether it's a sensing device or a machine, a robot, whatever it is. It's pretty quick to tell and at least throw out what needs some more work. But to utilize, for example, the sensor data, that takes, I agree too, at minimum, 3 to 5 seasons. How does this, because of the vintage variables, that's just a whole nother layer of difficulty of putting on plant stress data, applying it to where you're actually taking an action, you're measuring the outcome, and then next year it's just a completely different story. And how do you as a company or an individual learn to bring that data in to the most of its ability, or the best of its abilities? That's been one of my biggest challenges. But as far as if something works or not, I like to be at least, I don't always have to be number one, right? I'm happy being a number 2. Someone else proved it and it's working. That's fantastic. I'll bring it in, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and that you really just have to devote the resources. That's another pitfall, is if you're not willing to constantly measure or correct, it takes a team. It really does. And if you are unable to devote yourself to it, you're going to extend that time period out, 10 years before you could build confidence. So the more you could devote to it, the better.
Right.
Absolutely. Yep. That's that consistency. You're trying to create a new habit. I'd say on to add to it, going backwards and saying and spending time training on what we done traditionally. Why are we doing the pressure bomb? Why are we doing hand feel soil moisture test? Because a lot of these technologies are relative, and it's relative to how you're going to apply it to your specific location, all this to your operation, and that's the impact on it, is how are you going to use it? Because we all have different programs and real goals that we have in mind, based on the products that we're selling or producing for. Your bulk versus your estate, all this type of stuff. So what is the impact is it going to have, and does that technology even apply to it? So yeah, it's consistency. You have to say, okay, what's my educational track for us to understand that the technology is here to enhance what we've done for the last 20 years. We're all experts. Everybody's experts at it already. This is just here to help us with time and energy to get us further along this road. And response is a big thing. How can we minimize that response time, because we're consistently waking up in the morning with a new challenge of weather or just anything. It's continuous surface that we're working with that's ever changing, and technology allows us to minimize that gap and risk to achieve our goals. So I've spent a lot of time in saying, here's the history, here's where we're at, here's what you guys have already implemented. You guys have done this already. It's nothing new. It's just not on paper, maybe, So how do you got to really have that foundational level of educating on what this technology is replicating, what's it here to help us with. So.
Yeah, and actually to piggyback off of what Greg said, I think something that we try to look at too is, just because we've farmed a certain way always, or forever, doesn't mean that that's the direction that we can really go in going forward. I mean, we have some challenges that we've been up against, over the last, 5, 6 years, that are only going to be getting exponentially more, more heat waves, more, higher VPD days. We're seeing things that haven't been seen either for a very long time or have never been seen before. I mean, just seeing temps in one of my regions get to 129 degrees.
Wow.
We need to figure out better ways to collect data, figure out what exactly we're dealing with so that we can make the best possible management strategies and decisions.
So let me ask you about data. Let's ask about data a bit, right? So you've got a number of different technologies that provide you different information for different things that you're trying to solve. How do you think about data management and really more about decision making, right? So you've got a weather station, you've got soil moisture probes, you've got, farm management systems, you got all this different all these things telling you things. How do you think about how you make a decision with that data, right? What makes it easy? What makes it hard maybe today in tech?
Something that I love doing is, if you have a couple different technologies that are all the masters of certain type of data collection, I think it can be really cool sometimes if you understand those technologies well enough to be able to marry data together. They don't always talk together. Sometimes some technologies will agree to interface. That's, case by case, lots of proprietary information. So, what we've done that has worked really well and is really exciting is, marrying a couple of those data collectors together, using things like soil moisture and sap flow, looking at those and making management decisions. And it's given us just such an amazing look at where we're at, like what's in I always call it like the horse water trough. That's like the soil moisture. It's like, that's what the horse can drink from. Now, how is the horse feeling? That's the vine. How's the horse feeling? Is the horse thirsty? So it's cool to be able to see, in between, to connect those two together and you can get some good information. So I think that if you're able to have a few different, very special technologies, you can make really good management decisions somewhere in between all of those.
Yeah, for sure. So as we started getting these massive data flows, that's exactly what it is. It's data. There are people trained to manage data, not what it is, nothing, but they've gone through a full 4 years, maybe plus, of education on how to just organize data, how to store it, how to then, do people respond as a report in their email? Does a text message, whatever, the various forms of our communication. So I ended up hiring a guy that was just a database manager. And he just was like, well, numbers are numbers, data are data. And we have statistical models to say whether things relate or don't relate. You can tell me if I just organize this correctly, you can use your brain and your experience and say, oh, this makes sense, or no, doesn't make sense, or that's an anomaly. That's something that we need to flag. And then having someone on the team that was data oriented, didn't really care what it was, but just data, and saying, I know these statistical derivatives that will ping things out and say whether things make sense. And I know how to present it, just like sales stats and everything like that. No one, someone's not producing those understanding what product you're selling. No, they're just saying that it's going up, it's going down. Here's our percentage. So I looked, because we started before the ag tech boom, and was looking outside of the industry for a lot of things, oil and gas, all these things, pressures. They're all watching pressures and flows due to regulations for, years and years. I said, well, you know what? This data is getting beyond it's starting to take away from our time to making those decisions.
Well, because the data itself can be very overwhelming, right? And I was in soil moisture for a number of years and so forth. And, what the soil moisture reading is on a, one time in 15 minutes is kind of meaningless, right? It's a data point, right? But it doesn't really tell you the trend. It doesn't tell you what's going on. And you've got to really put some intelligence around all that data in order for it to allow you to make a decision, right? We need to think about how we improve that decision process, because, I'm fond of saying, farm managers, not data scientists, right? That's not their job, is to sit there behind a computer and run an Excel spreadsheet with 10,000 rows, right? It is to make, decisions on the farm with challenging circumstances and unknown conditions, and, in order to hopefully get a good crop at the end of the year. And so what you're saying is you've got to invest in how you think about the data itself.
Yeah. So you're driving around in your truck and you're starting to see, you're starting to see this, like, oh, that's interesting. And then you can call someone and say, hey, can you put our degree days over the top of our last 15 years of bud break dates, or what is our yield relative to our degree day accumulation at April X? And then person is just focused on managing that data so that you can just be like, boop.
So you can make a decision. You can actually make a decision without
not having to go back into the office.
Sea of data.
Yeah, pull it all up, import it all. Yeah. Work it around, and then try and come to a conclusion. By that time, it's already changed. It's irrelevant whatever you were trying to look at. So I think that was one of our best investments at the time, was having someone that was just data. That's all they did, and they didn't really care what it was about.
I think also with that, I mean, that hits a really good point. Is if you weren't to have somebody who could just sit and digest the data, we're a 2-man team in the Vit department, and something that is huge for me to look at when deciding on using a new technology is that data. Is it easy to display? Is it digestible? Is it something that I can easily pass on to the winemaking teams along with a small report? It has to be, numbers are great and data is great, but if you don't use it, it's the tree falling in the wood that doesn't make a sound, So you really, I think, have to make sure that whatever dashboard or software you're going to use, that it's something that is natural for your the way that you think to use. Because I've definitely trialed technologies before that just don't work with the way that I think about irrigation or, ET or something like that. And so I have to, it has to be something that I'm excited to log on to, a few times a week and to look at that information. And I think you've got to narrow it down to that. You've got to get to something that you're paying for it. So you got to make sure that it's digestible to you and it's easy to show to your team and for them to understand it, or for it to be easy to explain.
Interesting. Rob, have you guys approached data?
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge by far, and ultimately, hopefully, someone's going to create that all-in-one AI platform that solves all of our problems. But no, it does currently fall on all of us as a team, or, as a point person that takes the lead. Something that we've adopted is heading into, once you set your goal, whether it's, reaching a certain chemical marker, such as color, or a yield marker, such as berry weights, really being clear and precise on mapping out the timeline for the year, meaning what data do you need to collect and when do you need to collect it? When do you need to be looking at it, right? So, so many things are going to require several sensing devices or mechanical implements, and it can become really overwhelming really quick. But if you can take the time, with yourself, with the representative from the producer or your team, and you can map out exactly what you should be looking at and when you should be looking at that really helped us out. If it was for shoot length measurements, making sure that I get appropriate leaf surface areas so I can retain my berry weights later, I know I'm only looking at, maybe it's an imaging technology during this time of year, right? And all my focus is going on that. And then I can transition into these plant stress, data collectors. And then perhaps some of the field, the in-house kind of lab technologies that are coming out, right? So just being really clear on and setting yourself up with this timeline, and really understanding the impact of each activity or each input. And then you just, you got to do your best. I agree that getting someone completely devoted to it is important. We all end up with 20 different logins and 30 different passwords for all this stuff. And, hopefully right around the corner, there's going to be that all in one, but currently it's a challenge.
Let me ask that maybe as we kind of wrap up this discussion is, where do you hope technology takes us in the next couple of years? Is it that unified application where, it talks to everything? I mean, what's your
Jarvis
list?
Yeah. I want to walk into my office and look at the TV and Jarvis is telling me my biggest problem and what I need to do. And, I don't think that's far away, we're getting really, really close. And, I think it'll definitely be, in our lifetimes, hopefully sooner than later. But that would be my dream, is the all-in-one, central nervous system that can guide us as professionals.
That would be cool. I agree, Rob. I think that's what we all dream about. That's why I always ask everyone to interface, all of the text to interface, all the softwares to interface. Because, we are actually, as I'm getting approached by more and more people, I am starting to see actually some of these tech companies are putting more pieces of the puzzle together. I think now that they've been able to figure out good ways to measure a lot of things like soil moisture, pressure switches, VOCs for smoke taint, things like that. They're starting to figure out the best ways to do that. And a lot of these companies are putting them together and giving you bigger packages. And I think, like Rob said, I mean, we can all hope for the Jarvis for sure.
For sure. I think, as I approach a technology, one of my first questions to them, are they willing to integrate? Or are you going to be in your proprietary box that I have to go to you for everything? And throughout, the past decade, those who have said, I'm going to be the everything, I'm going to create everything, have been the ones that don't do anything well. So I've always asked, so what are you here to do well? Well, I want to be the one-stop platform for everything. Well, have you looked down the line of history and those who have failed at doing that? Because
there's a lot of skeletons buried on.
Say, where's my ROI, right?
Yeah.
The venture capitalist world struggled with that because it takes a long time. We didn't learn how to farm overnight. That being a huge thing of saying, will you integrate? And then on, as Courtney was saying, with like, when you find that platform that speaks to you, you can get all those other things that you do well, that other sensors or whatever it might be, start plopping into that, because that matches your flow, your thought process, how it's even the colors that they use. It's all things that are psychological in terms of managing software too, is just saying, is the top button weather, is the bottom button ground stuff, and in between, do I move to the right as the season moves along? All these things that we are hardwired naturally to do. Does it fit that, and does it fit my current state? So the industry is getting better at playing together, which is allowing us to then really work with these technologies, because before it's you had to buy everything and use a little. Buy everything, then use a little. And then that's where you end up with the 20 logins with everything available, yet you only use 25% of it, 5% of it, maybe even 2%. So, and that's it. It's just, if you're not willing to integrate, then we can't do it, because we're a community in the vineyard and wine industry, and we collaborate and we share a lot, because we understand that, if I'm not doing something that my neighbor needs, and vice versa, we're all in it, and together, and the better we progress, the industry is just going to achieve just greater things. So if your ag tech company doesn't willing to adopt that personality, then
find a different one.
Well, I won't see you in a couple of years.
So I said one more. I said that was the last question. I've got actually one more question. You guys keep coming up with great answers. You keep my mind shift to something else. And so here I am again with another question, which is, so people are listening to this on this webinar are all different stages of adoption, right? Maybe haven't adopted anything, right? Maybe they just get a weather feed, and that's kind of their technology. You guys are different. You're, clearly made big, investments in technology. What's your advice long term? Is it something that you expect farming will never deal without technology? Do you think it's a nice to have now, but you can, where do you, what good advice would you give someone that's just trying to figure it out? Maybe they've done a little tech, maybe they haven't been successful, maybe at their first effort, which, I always laugh. It's like, every farmer's got a barn full of stuff that didn't work. Right. So what would your advice to be on either getting invested in this or how to be successful at it?
I think we are getting to the place, climate wise and regulation wise, where as all these regulations are coming down the pipeline, I'm not quite sure how we can unmarry farming and technology. I think they kind of are going to start living intrinsically, because the amount of things that we have to collect for regulatory purposes and with water becoming a huge limit for us. I'd say for all of us going forward, it's only going to be more and more limiting. I don't really see that changing. And we need to have a really good grip on how we're farming and how to be more efficient with the inputs that we have. And I just don't know that you can do that without technology. And it doesn't need to be expensive. There are a lot of options out there. It's not a one size fits all model by any means, right. But if you're someone who hasn't adopted any technology yet, dip your toe in, find something, talk to your friends, talk to other people who have used different things. There is something out there for you that can be really affordable and can make a huge difference in the way that you farm.
Great. Anyone else? Yeah. Final thoughts? Yeah. Go, Don.
Yeah, it's my advice would really take the time to understand what your biggest challenges are currently. Again, if chasing the shiny penny and moonshots is your thing, and you got the time, have at it. I'd love to talk to you about it in the future. But really honing in on what is urgent and important to you, and then, as Courtney said, starting the discussion. Don't keep it to yourself. There's having these secrets. It's not really getting us anywhere. Reaching out, to us. Professionals around us, live in Napa Valley. This is the livelihood of many people. This is what we do. We live and breathe it. We've probably experienced something very similar to what you're going through. So if you can really be clear on what your challenge is or what your goal is, just having a really clear vision, and then start the discussion. And we're all here to help for sure. We all want to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's maybe to wrap that up. So it was Bill Gates, and I've lived on this principle with applying technologies. He said something in the realm of automation applied to an efficient operation will enhance those efficiencies. But on the other hand, automation applied to an inefficient operation will only enhance those inefficiencies. So what is that, what is devouring our time? Because some of your most efficient aspects of your business, if you can draw yourself or apply something that's going to be even more efficient, that allows you time to then start tackling process of inefficiencies, to then find a technology and then get it to a point of adopting technology. Yes, right. So I've really held to that and say, okay, apply it to what we're really good at and what's efficient in current process, and how is technology going to enhance that to give us the time to tackle some of these challenges that are difficult for us current in our current state. So that's what I would leave with it. Remember that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Now, And I appreciate you guys. You guys are great leaders in the industry and in your companies, and certainly your thoughts on this people should really think about as far as how they adopt. And I'm going to offer up, if I'm sure you guys are available, if another grower wants to call you and say, hey, I'm looking at this. I mean, people talking about, their experiences and how they're successful helps, I think, all of the industry. And I appreciate you guys, and wasn't set up this way, but you're all customers, and we appreciate your leadership and how you think about it, and we're glad to be partners. So with that, I appreciate your time. Hope everybody got a lot out of this webinar, and I guess I'll pass it back over to Kim.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you to Rob, Courtney, and Greg as well. That was a very interesting discussion. Before closing out, I would like to remind everyone of the upcoming Win Expo on December 1st in Santa Rosa. We'll have 13 conference sessions, including 3 that are focused on the vineyard, and actually Greg will be speaking at one of them. There'll also be 300 wine industry exhibitors in the trade show, including both AgCode and opti-harvest, so you'll have a chance to talk to Lance as well. To register for the Win Expo, go to wineindustryexpo.com. And if you'd like a free trade show floor pass or $35 off your conference ticket, use the promo code GrowingForward. I'll see you at the expo.